I have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting, you wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
News. We've got some exciting production news out of Lucasfilm that we're going to talk about. Colin and I are bringing this podcast to you guys kind of in the midst of a little bit of a disaster where we're from. There are some wildfires raging where we are right now, but we're both safe. Our families are safe, and so we are still going to deliver this podcast to you guys, and we're excited to get the show on the road. And as I already said, I'm joined by my gracious co-host, the Sabak scammer himself, Colin Archer.
Oh, man, what an introduction. I love Sabak. I've played it a few times. Man, Carter, these wildfires, they got some of my neighbors' houses. It's kind of a disaster. So that said, this is kind of a hasty podcast in the sense of we're recording in the middle of the day outside of our normal comfort zones. And there might be some sounds in the background that aren't 100%, some pounding or this or that. It's, like I said, it's kind of hasty. So forgive us for that.
We're recording remotely, and there's a lot going on.
But we're still going to deliver a great product. This was this wasn't going to be a tip-top episode of this season, but I think once we peel back the layers, there's going to be some nuance here that's a lot of fun and gives some insights into some of these characters that make this episode, a sleeper, if you will.
Yeah, so this episode it kind of has the hallmarks of being an episode that people were really going to love. Based on the episodes people love from season 1 and 2, it's an Omega and Crosshair-centric episode. Those were always the episodes that did the best when it was, about the individuals in the last 2 seasons, and now they're together. And so you see that prospect, and you're like, okay, this is going to be a pretty good episode. It's called A Different Approach, and there's a theme running throughout the episode on why it's called A Different Approach, kind of teaching. It's not really, it feels like it's meant to teach Crosshair something, but it doesn't really get that across. It doesn't really teach anybody but the audience something, but this is a little more of there's a lesson in this episode about taking a different approach to things, and then listening to your friends, things like that. So a little bit of the animated for kids vibe out of this, where we can kind of draw a straight lesson, especially from the title. But that's not a knock against this episode at all. The episode opens with the end of the last episode. We saw Crosshair and Omega escape from Mount Tantus, and they jump to hyperspace, and now we see them in their ship in hyperspace. It is smoking, it is a wreck, it has been shot at, and they're trying to stabilize it so they can get out of hyperspace. And it just begins with a lot of tension, verbally and visually, between Crosshair and Omega, as their not thought out plan continues to kind of snowball.
Yeah, it's unraveling big time, and boy, they got some serious luck on their hands with this shuttle holding together like it did in hyperspace. Kind of the trope in Star Wars is the shuttle's damaged, and they have to repair it before they are able to jump to hyperspace, right? So they got some luck on their side with this one for sure.
Yeah, they absolutely do. They absolutely do have some luck on their side with that one, because they come out of hyperspace, and this has really got me. So they're able to come out of hyperspace. They come in like in the span of hyperspace time, milliseconds from ramming into a planet. Their ship is directly, it pops out of hyperspace, planet right in front of them. And so they were really, really close. We learn the name of this planet later in the episode. It's called Lau, L-A-U, Lau. I don't remember if they say Lau or Lau, but it's L-A-U. And they go crashing right down to the surface of this planet.
Yeah. And it's good to have another planet in Star Wars. The Empire's already here, and lots of stuff going on. And
I'm all over this planet.
Yeah.
It is, because it's just like the whole planet is essentially either Scottish Highlands or like the worst slum and ghetto in Glasgow that you can imagine.
Yeah.
But everyone is Scottish on this planet.
Yeah, it's a good planet. I love visiting new planets in Star Wars. And so, like, what's really cool is we can roll them into our RPG or something like that. You know, it's just little thing in a cartoon, right? But you get to add in some real cool flavor.
Yeah, absolutely. So they crash to the planet. They realize it's going to take months to fix this ship. That ship is totaled. You look at it and you know it's the same one from the trailer that we see. So another trailer shot. And Omega is trying to get the coordinates to Mount Tantus for when they go back, she says. And Omega is so selfless because she says they need to go free the other clones. They need to go free the other animals there. And Crosshair, you know, honestly, rightfully says, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, we're not going back. We're never going back there. And if I were in Crosshair's shoes, I think I'd say the same thing. One, so Omega's got this, like, bleeding heart, obviously. She's always trying to do what's right by people, humanoids, animals, whatever. And so you still have to, one, Crosshair's the most grizzled of the group, so obviously he's not going to be compassionate about going back. But even the other Bad Batchers, I feel, may be hard-pressed to go back there and liberate the regs that are there. I mean, it's not like the Bad Batch has ever had a super great relationship with reg clones in general. They may have friends in Cody or in Rex, but they're not about helping the regs out all the time. And in this moment of they're running from the Empire, and Omega is vital to what's going on in the Empire, and they don't know this yet, but with Omega being vital to what's going on in the Empire, there's absolutely no reason to return to that planet, even to liberate a couple hundred clones.
Yeah, really. I mean, just think, do the prisoners who escape from jail worry about breaking the other prisoners out? I mean, you could have the best intentions, but, you know, sometimes even in a cartoon setting, you got to be based in reality, right?
Right.
Especially with Mount Tantus.
If you look at this, you got to, you know, you go and free these clones, then what's the next step? I mean, why are you not freeing everybody in the galaxy? And obviously that's what they want to do in the long term with the rebellion, with the resistance, and with, you know, this is confirmed to be a cell like we've seen in the Age of Rebellion visual guide. But this is not the beginning of the rebellion. This is not the end of the rebellion. This is the very beginning of the rebellion. And so large-scale prison riots are just not going to fly here. And so Crosshair's trying to bring Omega back down to Earth a little bit. But they leave their crashed shuttle. They say, you know, there's a town that they know down the road they need to get to. And so we then get back to Mount Tantus for just a little bit of this episode. We don't spend long on Mount Tantus, but we walk in. We have Dr. Hemlock. You know, we know that Palpatine doesn't know Omega's escaped. Palpatine doesn't know about Omega's positive blood test. Hemlock wants to get her back before the chickens come home to roost, and Palpatine kills him. And so he waltzes in to go speak to Nala Se, which is a good first move. Obviously, she's the one who helped Omega escape. But before we get to the meat of this conversation, they give you this crazy side view of a Kaminoan sitting down. And she's obviously sitting down on a bed designed for people because her knees are like at her shoulders. And she's got her long neck. And it gives me, like, one of the first times I can ever remember a side view of a Kaminoan in animation, like a perfect, you know, side looking directly on 90 degrees to the side. And how do you think Kaminoans would wear neckties? Do they wear them at the top of their neck, or do they wear them at the bottom of their neck to cover their chest? Because that's what this side shot made me think about, was how lanky these guys are.
Yeah, that's always a good, like the snake wearing it, or a brontosaurus or something. That's a good joke.
Yeah.
Gosh, exactly. I don't know. I think it's an option, you know.
It's either way. They can accessorize it however they want. That makes sense. So Hemlock goes in and begins talking to Nala Se, threatening her because he wants to know how Omega escaped. How could this possibly happen? One, how'd she escape with Crosshair? And obviously Nala Se didn't know that was going to happen. But then Hemlock gives, one, the audience a reminder, and two, Nala Se some information that, hey, Omega's blood test it came back positive. You know, it never came back positive when Nala Se was testing it. And Nala Se says, oh, it's a false positive, of course. But in reality, we know that Omega has some kind of M count, some kind of predisposition to have force sensitivity at the very least. And so Hemlock now knows this as well.
Yeah. What struck me about this scene is how slow Hemlock speaks. It's kind of weird. And there's a couple other instances where people are just speaking really slow. And I wondered, I don't know if it stood out enough for me to remark about it. I don't know if they did that in previous episodes. It doesn't feel like it. But
no, I think you're right. And, Nala Se, she speaks so quietly.
Yeah,
and she talks also so slow. And so it's like their conversation is ASMR for science nerds. It's like ASMR for physics PhDs. Because they're both these scientists, but they're just talking very slow and delivering their words without any inflection.
Right. Or people who like idiot villains. Like, why would you go tell a prisoner, like, hey, man, this is a false, her blood sample popped here. What's up with that?
That's not this was definitely, this was a real Bond villain moment because we get I don't remember anything out of this scene that says this is why he told Nala Se that. Like, he's trying to get something out of Nala Se by telling her that. And, there's a little bit of that. There might be a little subtlety behind it, like, hey, we know you lied to us about Omega, so give it up or we're going to kill you. But he didn't say any of that. There's nothing, nothing is implied there.
Yeah.
He just goes in to tell her, hey, here's your update on how our mission is going, prisoner. All right, see you later.
Yep, it's crazy.
Yeah, it was a little odd. So we cut back to Lau and Omega and Crosshair. They steal some clothes. They've got some pretty classic Star Wars looks. It is astounding to me. This is that the Empire is so willing to allow so many people around wearing face coverings. We see this in regular society, that especially oppressive and authoritarian governments, but even Western governments that have security reasons for whatever, limit people wearing face coverings in public. We saw a lot of that go away with COVID, obviously, because everybody was wearing a face covering. But before COVID, there was a lot of conversation about people wearing face coverings in public. And the Empire, for being a totalitarian government, sure lets a lot of random people walk around with their face covered.
Yeah,
when you're dealing with insurrections and rebellions across the galaxy. But the other coin of that is you have all these alien cultures that cover their face for a variety of reasons that may be, necessary to their life, like Zuckuss can't even breathe. And so how do you even police that, I guess, is the other side of that coin.
Yeah, it's interesting. And what struck me about these scenes is how, like, on the borderline of good and bad, these characters, you can't even say bad. It's like this stealing for necessity thing. That's an overt stuff. If they walked around without these, when I say they, Omega and Crosshair, if they walked around without a disguise on, they'd be captured and it would lead to their death, right? So, right. I mean, you kind of have to steal an outfit. You got to change your appearance or you're going to die. And I'm sure there's a lot of analogs of that in real life history. But, like, these are the good guys. I think it's kind of obvious, but what the answer to my question is where you draw the line of breaking the law, to ensure your safety. And stealing some clothes is justifiably on one side of the line, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think absolutely. I mean, it's the same question. Your children are starving. Do you steal a loaf of bread? And it's like, yes. That's what you have to do in that situation. Sorry, you're not going to let my kids starve because of this $2.99. Yeah. But yeah, it's the same calculus. So Omega and the Crosshair, after they get their disguises, they go to the spaceport, and we see in this spaceport something that I think is really interesting, just from a macro fan perspective. This doesn't have anything to do with in-universe. Is that the aesthetics and the look of this spaceport are very, very similar to the port in Solo and the port in Kenobi. And the only reason I bring that up is because we're now getting to a point where Disney has had Star Wars for so long, and we're getting so much Star Wars content now. Before when it was just the first 6 movies in the Clone Wars, you really had a lot of Star Wars reinforcing itself. Obviously, you'd have callback lines, you'd have aesthetics that look the same. But this landing site and this shuttle site, we've seen it pop up in Solo, in Kenobi, in The Mandalorian. We now see it pop up in The Bad Batch. But there's not really a great other example in any of the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy. The closest we have is when Anakin and Padme leave in Attack of the Clones, but even that ship depot looks a lot different. And so we're starting to see Star Wars feed into itself a little bit and starting to see things from the Disney era influence things in the Disney era, giving us a lot of repetition in the way that the Imperial aesthetics look that are divorced from the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy in source. Now, all of this stuff is inspired by those aesthetics, and this isn't to say it looks bad, because it doesn't. It looks good. But it's very interesting that we're starting to get these visual connections to other Star Wars properties, but that were not the original 6 movies.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, that's a really deep observation. And I want to say what an in-universe explanation for it is that there's 2 or 3 contractors who make these starports in the whole galaxy.
Yeah,
and they're like,
you're probably right.
We got a grant from the Republic. We're here to build this planet starport. Have a good day. It looks like every other starport out there. And that's present in society in real life too. There's these school buildings all over where we live, and they all look the same. It's kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. There's few different styles, but you can drive from little town to little town, and they have the same little school building. And it's just one contractor who went around and built the school that, as they got, taxpayer funded this and that. It's a fun concept to, I'm sure in real life explanation is pretty simple and kind of obvious, right? It's just we need to make this stuff look the same so it looks like in universe. But
it's another variation on the Clerks discussion of were there contractors on the Death Star when it blew up. Like, it's the same repetition of things in the Star. One of the reasons people like the Star Wars universe so much is that it is so lived in and that it feels so similar to our universe. So you can tell virtually the exact same story you can tell in the real world, but in this fantastical setting, and that brings a level of satisfaction that's different. And It makes it more fun, even though you can tell a good detective story or a good political thriller or whatever in the Star Wars universe. And so you have to always, that's why when you dig into these books, we always talk about how some of the best parts of the slice of life, and it just explains how someone in Star Wars goes to the bathroom. And it's like, this is as close to a real world connection as we can get here.
Yeah, it really is.
So they're at the spaceport, and Crosshair just absolutely suggests that he shoots the place up. He says, hey, I can kill half the people in this room before they even know what's happening. And that is just nuts. You were a psychopath, man.
Yeah.
And so Omega says, how about we don't do that, and instead we try something else. And so she goes and tries her something else, which is committing a crime, and not just like it's not like they're
nothing
committing
casual.
many crimes.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah, but she is going up to say to a random stranger, trying to bribe them. That is, to me, that doesn't feel like a 50-50 shot. That is not something that you're like, the best case scenario is they accept it. The worst case scenario is I go to Imperial prison. And so she has a lot of confidence to go up there and ask that. But we learn that this person with the Scottish accent is open to a bribe. But the bribe is insanely expensive. It's 15,000 credits per person, so they need 30,000 credits. This upsets Omega, but they go off because they don't have any other option. And so to succeed at getting their 30,000 credits quickly, they turn to a different crime. And now Omega is hustling people in a bar at cards. And one of the really interesting... So this episode was not my favorite episode of The Bad Batch. I would say it's so far been the worst episode of Season 3. It's not bad. It just is the worst of the 4. We don't get a lot of things explained in this episode or justified. Like, and this may be me not remembering well from a previous season, but what made it to where Omega could hustle people at cards like this? Like, there's no indication she's cheating. There's only indication that she is just winning after winning after winning after winning. And how? Like, do we have any knowledge on where Omega learned how to hustle people at cards like this?
Literally, we don't, right? I think it's all just a matter of her spending time with Sid and doing all that or whatever. But maybe this is where the M count comes in, right?
Sure. And that's a fine explanation.
But we haven't seen that.
And we don't need everything explained to us, but this was just something that felt odd to me, that out of nowhere, she's like a card shark. It's not even that she's winning over 50% of the time. She is just, as the moment she sits down at the table, destroying who she's playing against.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get a little bit of information on that, on why they had a sabacc prodigy walking around. So they talk to the bartender. It's a droid, and it's also Scottish. This part got me. This is when I noticed the Scottish accent thing. I was like, does that droid have a Scottish accent? And I was like, everybody has a Scottish accent.
That's hilarious.
And so I laughed and laughed at that. I think I had to pause. I was like, this droid. So we have an Imperial captain waltz in, and he goes and talks to the Scottish droid, and he gets some credits as protection money from the Scottish droid. This guy is obviously... anytime you have some detached empire living somewhere or somewhere else, and then they send some governor that's not from where you are, it turns to the same thing as the mafia, and he's just extorting
straight
them.
Exploitative, right?
Yeah, it's just sanctioned corruption for their protection or whatever kind of fines this guy wants to impose. So the captain sees Omega racking it up, racking up all this money, racking up all her wins, and he goes and starts to play cards with her, demands that they play cards. And so Omega also beats him. Again, no real indication why. She is not cheating, from what we can tell. She is only just stellar at this game. And so she beats him with the idiot's array of the game, the 3 Eastern Stars. I really want to know what this game is. It looked pretty cool. It looked pretty replicable in real life.
It's
so I
almost
want
like
to know more about this.
Gin rummy with sabacc cards or something like that.
Yeah, and they weren't like betting like a poker hand or like sabacc where you're betting as you go. They just had set amounts of money for who won the game.
Right.
And so this was very cool. This was interesting, but she beats the captain. He pays her fair and square for the 20,000 credits. And then as they're leaving, he says that they have to pay the fine for gambling. And this is just hilarious. I mean, come on. The guy played it. Obviously, he's got all the muscle, and you just have to do it. And Omega knows that. And so Crosshair's a little tense. He's like, I want to do this. But Omega pays them the 10,000, and they go on their way. A small detail that I forgot to mention is during the card game, the Imperial captain sends Batcher, the Luca Hound, outside. He says it's distracting. And this comes into play later because as Crosshair and Omega exit the bar, they can't find Batcher. And so they go to a friendly Scottish kid sitting on the side of the road who just moments before was selling fruit on the side of the road because he, for no apparent reason, is screaming how he's got this deal on some fruit in one of the scenes. Well, anyway, he walks up and he's like, "Oh, can't find your dog, eh?" And they say, "No, where is he?" And he says, "For $10,000, I'll tell you. For the measly price of $10,000, you too can be extorted by a Scottish kid to figure out where your lost pet is."
Yeah.
It was just nuts. Crosshair gets super offended, gets angry, and then the kid goes, all right, $5,000, final offer. And they pay him. They give him $5,000 to figure out where their dog is.
Yeah, you think they would have robbed him immediately after and be like, tough lesson, kid.
Yeah, he is a child, and Omega is a child. There's not even anything wrong with that, with her telling him no. They've got blasters. Crosshair is an adult. He's just double this guy's size, but it is astounding that this happened to them.
One thing I want to say about these scenes right fast, the commander, the Imperial governor or whatever he is, he's a really unique character. I don't think if we have seen, especially animated, a fat Imperial like this, they're really rare. So they did
so animated for sure, but he reminds me a ton of the administrator for the that Gateway Dam in Aldhani in Andor.
Okay.
What is that guy's name? Hold is his last name.
Yeah.
It's something Hold.
Yeah.
It's not Reginald, but it's something very similar to that.
Probably comic books too, but regardless, this guy's a real unique character. He's uniquely scumbaggish. He's just a thug, right? Some sort of mafioso almost.
Right. Right. Yes, he is. I mean, that's exactly what he is here on this planet. He's their governor, appointed, and then he's just running roughshod over them. I mean, he's the kind of, when you read the Thrawn novels, this is the kind of guy that Grand Admiral Thrawn is like trying to weed out of the Empire. Because Thrawn sees that this kind of person makes the Empire weak, and that's absolutely true, because they're completely self-serving. They're not even serving the evil Empire. They're just serving themselves. Right. They're leveraging the Empire for themselves. So when they get outside and ask the Scottish kid for their dog, and then they get to the spaceport, it just really, I think one of the things that rubs me the wrong way is this whole episode kind of just feels like your dog is in another castle. The princess is in another castle. Like it's like they get up to something. They're like, all right, now we need clothes. Okay, now we need a ticket. Okay, now we have to win these gambling games. All right, now where's our dog? Like it's just one thing after the other. It feels really not side questy, but like, okay, now the goalpost has been moved. Now you got to go do this thing instead. And it's not being moved by some scumbag character. It's just being moved by the writers. And so that was something that didn't feel like all of their issues were organic. It felt like their issues just popped up as they needed another reason to make this a 30-minute episode.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the result of this episode, we're kind of basically in the same spot that we were in. Not really. There is a change, but the episode itself didn't really move us towards that change in any meaningful way. So anyway, they get to the spaceport. There's all these animals in cages, and they learn the Empire stole their dog to extort them for money. And this guy wants all his money back. And so he says, they figure this out, and then they let the animals everywhere out. There's a big animal prison break, which has also become a theme of Disney Star Wars for some reason, is that, the animals are, obviously they represent liberation of the people under the Empire. That's what they represent every time. But for some reason, animal prison break, big theme, not only in the Bad Batch, but just across Disney Star Wars. All you got to do is remember The Last Jedi to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So then this guy, he's talking about, we stole your dog for money. Give me my money back. Also, you aren't going to have any use for money when Hemlock gets here. And this was another problem of mine with this episode. And, I hope that there are answers. I would love for someone to email us answers, DM us Instagram answers. Why does this guy know who Hemlock is? Like, this is super secret Mount Tantus laboratory. Last episode, Palpatine says, anybody knows what you're doing here, they'd be really upset. We've heard multiple times that a bunch of Imperials don't even know where this is. The only Imperials we see there are Science Division, or way up in the head of the government. Why on earth does this captain guy know who Hemlock is, know that this ship must have come from Mount Tantus, know that these people must need to go back there? Like, this is way too many floating pieces. The Imperial even says, he goes, oh, when I saw the crashed shuttle, you wouldn't think I'd piece it together? And if I were Omega and Crosshair, I'd be like, absolutely not. No, because there are many data points that you shouldn't even know exist. And how do you even know that these things exist? Yeah. And so that was something that really rubbed me the wrong way.
And it could have been a simple throwaway one line from Hemlock earlier in the episode, where at the end of the last, it's like, put out an alert to be looking for this shuttle. It's damaged and could crash.
Yeah, exactly. But we have no indication of that. And this guy seems to let on that he knows what's going, not that he knows literally they're doing cloning experiments or anything like that, but he knows that Hemlock's the guy who wants these two people, for whatever reason, who came from this place, who crashed that shuttle. It's just too many convenient points for this random character to be familiar with for me.
Yep.
When we've been building up the secrecy of Mount Tantus, and now just general any planet you land on, the Imperial captain knows about it. Like, that's not very secret. That's not very secret at all.
And the two of them were able to steal that shuttle pretty easy, it seems like, too, right? I mean, you can chalk that up to the incompetence of the Imperial guy, but it's pretty easy to wonder and see why the Empire fell, is because of the corruption just everywhere. When just a kid and one trooper could just, not casually, but pretty close, steal a shuttle.
Right. So when Crosshair and Omega get ready to make their escape, the Imperial captain freaks out, yells at his men, and one of the men he yells at is the coolest looking animated character I've seen in a really long time. And he is on screen for like 3 seconds. It lingers on him, making you feel like he is some special character. He's even dressed differently. And I don't think he is. I think he's just some random guy. But it's a TK trooper who's got a brown cloak on over his armor, and he's got what look like goggles on. And he looks awesome. Looked so sick, and I have no idea who he is. I just had to throw that out there. Coolest design they have put on the screen in years, and it's this random guy. So we then see the Imperial captain get a tentacle out of a cage that's been unlocked, come out, grab him, the door slams shut and relocks.
Yeah,
gotta be a Rathtar, right?
Yeah, Jurassic Park vibes there, right?
Yeah, big Jurassic Park vibes. But you think it was a Rathtar?
Yeah.
I couldn't think of anything other than
I don't know.
Rathtar.
Rathars are pretty filled with rage. Every time we've seen them, they burst out of wherever they're at, even in
That's
books.
true. And that door was open, so they could have just rolled on
Maybe
out
it was
of
a
there. Yeah,
Borgullet.
that makes sense. Oh, man. So Hemlock gets there, sees the carnage after Crosshair and Omega have escaped. They investigate the shuttle, they investigate the landing site, and then Hemlock makes the comment, notify all of our operatives about this development. And so I have a question to you. When he says this, who do you think of first? What's the first, person that comes to your mind?
Bounty hunters. I mean, Boba Fett would be. I don't think that's realistic for this, but it'd be the funnest. What I'd want to see.
Yeah, it would be fun. It would be fun. That'd be make for a really interesting dynamic.
But I mean, they got a whole plethora of bounty hunters to choose from.
That was when he says our operatives, that's what I was thinking. I think it's a mix of Imperials and bounty hunters, right? Like the goggled or the all black armor that we saw in the trailer, that we saw in the first 3 episodes. That guy, probably an operative. Someone like Inferno Squadron from the Battlefront games. Those people are probably considered operatives.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're going to be in this. I'm not saying that. But I think when he says notify all our operatives, it is a mix of Imperial specialists and bounty hunters. And so that's where we're going to see Cad Bane and Fennec Shand pop up, is likely in the next couple episodes.
And you can say not Inquisitors, right? That's a little bit above or outside of Hemlock's echelon to call on.
I think so.
Kind of stuff.
I don't even know if Hemlock knows about the Inquisitorius, but you're exactly right. How would he marshal those resources? How would he, really know that this needed to be done? It seems like he'd have to notify somebody to do that, and then he'd be in danger of Palpatine finding out that he lost the only Force-sensitive clone in the galaxy.
Or just some other up-and-comer putting their hand in the cookie jar, kind of like the Krennic situation, with Tarkin. Mm-hmm. He sits there and says, hey, Darth Vader, we got this on-the-loose clone with a questionably high M count that we need looking out for. Can you and the Devastator come swing around and find this person, right? And then it's just all over. You have a risk of stuff being hacked to pieces on one end of the spectrum, to the other of just like, oh, Mount Tannis, huh? What do we got going on here? And just too many cooks at that situation.
Yeah, what you just made me realize is this place is so secret that presumably Darth Vader does not know about it, because he learns about all of the cloning experiments in between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi in the Darth Vader comics. He goes to Exegol. He sees all of this happening. He is in utter shock. And so if this place is secret enough to be hidden from Darth Vader, why does this random Imperial captain know about it?
Yep. There you go.
So yeah, there's another point on that. So after we have all of the operatives notified, we then get cut back to Crosshair and Omega. They're flying through space in their newly captured shuttle, and we get a really, really gorgeous shot of some planets. They're unidentified, and they're just landing on this rocky moon, but there's this orange and blue. It looks like Mars with water, and then a gas giant right beside it. And it is just The animation blows you away every time you watch this show, and this was one of those shots where I was like, wow, this is gorgeous. I could just rewatch this a couple times.
Yeah, there's some animator or some team of people who are putting together just these planet shots who are like super proud of their work, right? And making these really gorgeous things that are just, even when they landed on this Lux planet or Lao planet, sorry, I mean, you had the spines of the rock sticking out. It's really cool.
Yeah, no, the animators really do a bang-up job on this. And it makes me excited for, the rest of the season and just the future of Lucasfilm Animation, because they really have found a good rhythm with this stuff. We get our heartfelt reunion with the Bad Batch. It's been 4 episodes and a year of real-life time since we've seen Omega with Hunter and Wrecker. And so we get her heartfelt reunioning with them one at a time. She gets Wrecker, then she gets Hunter, and you can see in their body language and their voice how much this means to all of them. And then you get the Crosshair reveal, which that one they leave us on a cliffhanger, which is really good. It is really good because I don't think they had the time to really sit down and get that out with the rest of the time in the episode. But maybe they could have cut some of the random your dog is in another castle missions and let us get some of that exposition in this episode.
Yeah, you're right. That would have been good.
And that's really the crux of my problem with this episode is we knew that they were going to be reunited. Once they escaped the planet, that was obvious. Why did we need to spend this whole episode seeing them kind of mess around just to get to Hunter and Wrecker? Like, it didn't feel necessary. It felt like everything that could have been communicated in this episode could have just happened at the beginning of another episode. The part where we talked about at the beginning, the name of the episode and a little bit of the life lesson, is throughout this, as we saw when Crosshair suggests, why don't I just shoot up this train station? He keeps being rebuffed by Omega for saying, you don't want to do that, blah, blah, blah. We need to go about it a different way. And Crosshair keeps saying no, blah, 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 for whatever reason. And what we're learning here is you need to trust people to do it their way and not your way. And Crosshair seeing that, Omega's way is working out some of the time. And then at the end, we have to use Crosshair's way. And then we see that Crosshair's way also works. And it was just a little taxing to get through this episode with that repeated lesson and no real development in sight.
Yeah.
So this was a weaker episode.
Yeah,
for me.
I had fun with it in the sense of the different approach. If Crosshair is a hammer, then Omega, she's what, a feather, I guess, a spoon.
Yeah, I don't know, like
yeah,
something completely different. Like I just not in the same ballpark. If Crosshair is a hammer, then Omega is like a golf club or a razor, or it's just like they're completely different results.
Right, and she's the lighter side of this, right? She's got and I don't want to say this definitively, but like maybe a better foundation of morals instead of just going and laying stuff into waste, or hey, maybe we should let these animals go, and then how are we going to come up with the money, or even the idea of I really like her little line. Let our problem turn into an opportunity. That's my morals don't allow me to think that way, to even come up with a line like that. So
right.
I thought that was fun coming from her. And so if there's any development in this episode, it's just a show between locked in prison and the tutelage of the Bad Batch, and even including Crosshair, is that she's going to be this uncanny jack of all trades that's going to be unstoppable. Because not only can she pilot a ship, she can pilot a damaged ship, and she can crash it and survive, right? And then she can be this ultra charisma to convince not only Crosshair, but this person running the spaceport to beat corruption, right? And then she can go whip out this card shark side of her that just destroys people. And like, seriously, think about that. If you had the ability in real life, just can go and sit there, and you know what? I need an extra 15 grand. I'm going to go to Vegas and get it. And then you just do it. Well, why would you do that? Why would you work any job anywhere if you could just go casually make money playing cards? That's a dream lifestyle for some people, right?
Right. It is. And
then they go on a liberation mission. So you got this mini commando who could just, no obstacle is too tall. It's kind of fantastical in a sense of like some characters shouldn't be able to just stroll over everything. But if you take some of that away, it's really cool.
I'll say for Omega's sake that I agree with you completely. She has become this jack of all trades. She's absorbing the characteristics of the Batch, but also Sid, and just, she's a sponge. And I think that part of that will be justified through this M count thing. But the part about most of it, other than this card game, is it does feel earned. She says, when she's piloting, she never mentions, Tech taught her how to fly, but we remember last season many, many times Tech teaching her how to fly. She does say, when asked about plan number whatever, yes, Tech had me memorize all of those. And so there are a lot of instances in Omega's recent past that we can point to justify most of her skills. And like you said, there's probably a justification for the card game that being at Sid's bar all the time. It's just we didn't get that one on screen, it didn't feel like to me.
Right.
But there are, she has more justification than we sometimes see for characters to have these abilities.
Yep, you're right. It's a kid show, and the kid part of the show has to do really cool things.
And she is really cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm really enjoying Omega. She really has become my favorite part of this show, which has been good. She's been very interesting so far. That being said, that's the end of this part of the podcast. That's the end of the meat of this episode, talking about this episode of The Bad Batch. Season 4, it was good. I had a great time watching it. I'd say that I hope that we can improve on some episodes or get a little more meat on the bone for future episodes. Yeah.
And they'll come along, right? I mean, like I said at the beginning, I think you can peel back some of the layers. You see what this character is capable of now. And I think we well discussed how we need an explanation for all that.
Mm-hmm. I think so. So our next segment, How the Force Works segment. For new listeners, this segment is where we go and get a question from our Patreon subscribers, and we answer it live here on the show. This question comes from Loaf, and it's a pretty good one. So let's hop into How the Force Works. All right, Colin, so for How the Force Works, we've got a very simple question, and that question is topical to this episode. What would you like to see next from a Star Wars animation?
I thought we discussed that one of the last weeks with the Mace Windu cartoon.
We've had this question. We've had a similar question to this before, but it's been a little while. It's been a while since we've answered this one.
Yeah, seriously though. Gosh, if we assume that this Bad Batch is like a capstone of some sort of Clone Wars, because season 1 started right where the Clone Wars ended, and then they're being rolled into these TK troopers and being put out and all this other stuff, and you got the Bad Batch in the midst of all this. I don't saying this show is a capstone of the Clone Wars is not far off the mark. That leads to another opportunity of, you can then say, what era would the producers of a Star Wars cartoon want to explore the most? And if Kathleen Kennedy has a say, if the new movies have a say, then it's going to be something in the sequel era, right? And you could easily, and then it has to be kid-centric, right? And so I think you could easily find something along the lines of, some sort of Force-sensitive kids being sought out by Rey's new Jedi Order, and whatever new movie they're going to come out. That seems like a huge stretch. All the other stuff that we've seen has been way, it's kind of like an easy path in a sense of like the Clone Wars or, something to have to do with the Rebels, where you got, in Rebels, we saw Lando Calrissian and we saw Leia sneak in there as like a guest appearance kind of thing. And so, when you factor all this stuff in, there's what you want to see, and then there's what they're going to make, and what's practical in reality, all these other things. Gosh, it's tough. I'd say some sort of sequel era thing, right? Mm-hmm, but just as much as what I'd like to see is Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy and some young folks doing something with that.
Well, that's mine. Luke Skywalker's, you can have the kid characters easy because it's an academy, so they can be young, and it's just ripe for adventures with a long runway and time period. And you can make some big story impacts in between those movies, the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, because we've already seen Dave do that with Ahsoka. And so there's room for that to be played around with, and that's my dream, certainly. For a sequel-era show, I really think that the ground is ripe between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, kind of an anthology show of seeing how different planets are coping with the, bam, out of nowhere First Order occupation. That's a time period we know nearly nothing about between those two. And so I think that would be a place that we could really easily see some expansion in an animated TV show.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page with that Luke's Academy thing. It is a really good idea. It exists right alongside with the Mandoverse. And so you talk about opportunity for cameos and this and that. You throw that cash cow Grogu in there, you got a recipe for success.
And that's what makes me feel like that's why they haven't done it, is because it shares that time period with The Mandalorian, and Dave may not have Dave is very clearly, while he's as creative director, he's directing the direction of many of the projects. He's basically been handed this era from the way it feels and, the way those projects all connect in this era. And we're not getting new things published in this era. And so all of that kind of equals, hey, they have a really intentional story they want to tell in this time period. And so that could be the reason we haven't gotten the animated show there yet. But I really would like to see them work that in there. Right. Whether it's a few years down the road when Dave's movie is up, I would really like to see that kind of molded into that groove.
Yeah. There's another thing I want to add. There's a lot to this, right? In The Mandalorian, which is Grogu's primary vehicle, there's a lot of serious undertones. Especially when you consider season 3 of, the resurrection of Mandalore and getting rid of Moff Gideon and the Imperial Remnant and stuff. Whereas Grogu lends himself to a lot of whimsy, right? And so maybe an animated vehicle for Grogu would lend itself to more whimsical nature of his character, his young character, right? But the flip side of that coin is, Disney and Lucasfilm might not want to do that with that character, to make him just some fun-loving little thing that's what his character is. They want some seriousness to it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. 100%. So normally when we finish this segment, we plug our Patreon. But at the top of the show, Colin and I mentioned that our area has been ravaged by wildfires, and so we do not want to ask you guys for Patreon right now. What we'd like to say is if you have some spare money that maybe you would put towards a Patreon, we would really, really be honored if you would consider putting that money towards the Amarillo Area Foundation Disaster Relief Fund. So the Texas Panhandle is ravaged by wildfires, like we said. Those fires are still burning.
Hundreds of thousands of acres.
Exactly. We're up to, on one fire, 850,000 acres. This fire stretches over 100 miles across 7 counties. It is devastating. And we know a lot of people personally who have lost their homes, lost all of their belongings. Thankfully, we don't know anybody who has lost their life. But these firefighters continue to fight these fires. And so if you're listening to this and you have a few bucks to spare, really, really consider going to AmarilloAreaFoundation.org/disaster and donating whatever you can to this disaster relief fund.
And lots of firefighters personally that we know, good friends of ours, are out there putting their lives on the line to save lives and save livestock and save people's houses. But I drove by houses this morning that were lived-in homes that people are now living in hotels with the clothes on their backs. And it's harrowing to see. And we're not talking a few houses here and there. We're talking north of 50 homes that are gone, never to return, that were just empty property where they stand now.
And that's in one community. There's 6 or 7 small communities that, when a fire like this hits them, that half of the town is gone and it's not coming back. There's no indication that these people have any way to recover. And so we really, if you have the funds, we'd appreciate if you could go to AmarilloAreaFoundation.org/disaster and donate whatever you can.
Yeah, and do a Google search for Texas Panhandle fires, and there'll be a lot of information on there. Lots of really good pictures out there. I say good, lots of really scary pictures out there. Good and quality pictures, informative pictures about the nature of what's going on here. And there's some people out there that really do need your help.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. With that, we appreciate y'all's continued support of us, of the podcast. We couldn't do it without you guys. And so we're going to continue this podcast by heading on over to our HoloNet news section. We've got 4 news stories today that we're ready to talk about, some exciting stuff. And so, Colin, we're going to hop into the HoloNet news right now. So, first story, this one is, it's kind of expected, but it has a little bit of a teaser that I don't think is true, but that makes us excited. So, Stellan Skarsgård recently gave an interview, and other than saying Andor is Star Wars for adults,
You
which
made
is a
the
little
HoloNet.
insulting, but also a little accurate, he said that he thinks Andor Season 2 is going to be releasing in late 2024 or early 2025. Yeah, it would be very nice. I would love to see that happen, because then that would mean that this year we're going to be getting 3 live-action Star Warses. But I think late 2024 is probably going to be covered up by Skeleton Crew. I don't think we're going to get Andor until
I think
early
you're right
25.
There. I think 2 live-action Star Wars and an animated. Plus, I mean, there's no reason we couldn't get some other animated thing that we haven't heard about, like Tales of the Jedi or something, right? It seems like totally within bounds to me, and I can't wait for Andor Season 2.
Oh, yeah. I think it's probably, of everything on the horizon, it's
most
probably the thing
anticipated.
I'm most excited about. Oh, man. Someone is at my front door. I'm sure everybody just heard that. I guarantee everybody just heard my Alexa letting me know that someone's at the front door. Whoever it is, Cassidy's going to have to answer it, and they're probably here for me, and they're going to have to wait, because we've got some podcasting to do. So our next news story to cover is the fact that Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu has a working title now. Now, this working title, it can be all kinds of things. It's something usually silly, but that covers up what the production's called. So the report is that The Mandalorian and Grogu's working title is Thunder Alley.
That reminds me of Days of Thunder, a racing movie. It's a Tom Cruise movie.
I haven't heard of Days of Thunder.
I don't even know if I've ever seen it, but Thunder Alley is a racing connotation term to me. But I want to be wrong. That seems kind of strange.
So what I got from just reading online, I did not know this knowledge. I did not have this knowledge firsthand. I will not take credit for this. I've never read this book. But there's a Legends novel called Before the Storm that has a region of space in the New Republic called Thunder Alley. And so that's kind of interesting that there's a Legends connection. The book is not super well known. It's not like a big Star Wars Legends novel or anything. I mean, it's just another one of the novels that's in the continuity of the Legends timeline. But that term, they always have a reason for stuff like this, and so maybe it's time we bust that book out and read along and try to figure out what they might be pulling from that book, if anything.
Just reading this article a little bit here, it sounds to me, there's a lot of stuff in fiction when you want to do something with your characters that is impactful on them, but doesn't impact the whole universe. So you can put them basically on a side quest and have them accomplish whatever that you want, and they get this personal growth out of it that is really cool and fun. But the rest of the galaxy in this case isn't going to be like, hey, we need to go take care of this. Instead, the perspective of, it's up to us to take care of this problem and no one else is going to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. And I'm sure that our listeners do too. And so it'll be interesting. We have another news story. This one is pretty exciting. I don't know, Colin, did you play this game? You're gonna know which one I'm talking about.
It looks
did
like
you play
a Halo or Wolfenstein.
Okay, so I think it's a Wolfenstein. It's very similar to Wolfenstein. It's the first Star Wars shooter ever. Was developed in 1995. It's called Star Wars Dark Forces. And today, on February 28th, it has been launched as a remaster. For modern consoles, they just updated the look. They did everything else. And this was a pretty successful video game. I haven't played it, but the remaster looks really good. They did just some shots that we have of the updated way that people look, the way that holograms have been updated, the way that cutscenes, or not cutscenes, but the way that scenes have been updated. They all are really, really crisp and sharp. And so I think that this may make me play this game.
A similar situation to this is, it's not a remaster, it was a new game, but they made a Warhammer 40K game called Bolt Gun. That is a Wolfenstein / Doom skin, basically, which is what this is. I mean, it's just Doom reskinned. And, it's all the rage to either make similar games, like a Warhammer 40K game that was never made, or a Star Wars version where they've reskinned Doom and then updated for this. It's low-hanging fruit because you can play it, just casually, some cases on your phone, but on consoles, when these games came out, the consoles weren't capable of playing these games. It was PC only. And they were shared on floppy disks, not even CDs. And so, I don't know about this remastered version, but if you're somehow able to get a hold of the original version to play on a console, it would download instantaneously. And you'd spend about 4 hours maybe playing it. The hardest part would be to figure out how the maps are laid out. Back then we couldn't Google what the maps laid out looked like. So it was trial and error to figure these things out. Now if you run into a roadblock, you Google it or go watch a stream and somebody will tell you how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, you get it figured out pretty fast.
Yeah, $30
they had game guides
or
back
something.
in the day
You
for that,
couldn't
right?
just casually go do like
your parents weren't going to buy you a $30 game guide. It's a book that
it was
tells you how to beat a video game.
And so, like, the original Mario Brothers, you had to beat yourself. The original Doom, you had to beat yourself. The original Zeldas. And so, just I watched the preview. I was running my mouth here, and this reskin makes it look way fun. Have Darth Vader talking and stuff like that.
Doesn't it look so cool?
I will say, though, and I don't know if it's an artifact of me being old or whatever, but when I played that Bolt Gun game, I got physically ill. Like I was dizzy or nauseous from something that way the screens were making it move or something like that.
Have you been on a cruise before? Have you ever been on a cruise? Okay, I don't think it doesn't sound to me like you're the cruise kind of guy. If the video game was giving you motion sickness,
my wife wants to go on one, and part of me's dreading it because it's.
Just take Dramamine before you play Dark Forces.
I do that before I get on roller coasters. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we have our final news story to talk about. Broke while we were recording this. We've been recording this for about 59 minutes, and this broke 38 minutes ago. And so this is brand new, fresh news. You're hearing it hopefully for the first time from Star Wars Station, and that is that Respawn's first-person shooter video game, Star Wars first-person shooter game, is canceled. We had just talked about this last week, and how this was going to be rumored to be Mandalorian-themed. It was, the new FPS game, just like Dark Forces was not going to be multiplayer. It was going to be a story-driven FPS game, and it's canceled. Respawn has said, nope, it's not happening anymore, which is very interesting and really demoralizing, but is the constant state of Star Wars video games. I mean, it's just Star Wars video games are worse off than Star Wars movies are sometimes, as far as things getting announced and things getting canceled, and it just is really demoralizing.
Is. We always want to see and play more Star Wars games, and they're a lot of fun. This one's really sad, but this comes off the heels. There's a game that just came out called Suicide Squad. Kill the Justice League or something like that, and it bombed horribly. Like the company put out statements like it's below expectations, but some of the headlines I read were like on the PC side of it, you can see how many people are playing a game at any given moment, and the numbers on that were abysmal compared to how many purchased the game at first and were playing it, right? And that doesn't bode well because games anymore, everybody it seems is like wanting to make this some sort of. I didn't look at that Suicide Squad, but they want to make a cash cow like Fortnite and sell these skins or sell some sort of upgrades that make your character look cooler or something like that, right? And so these games aren't just casual projects; they cost tens of millions of dollars. And in the wake of these abysmal failures of just millions of dollars being wasted, I'm sure some hard look at a lot of these things was being analyzed here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and part of the reason that this happened is EA is laid off 670 employees that got announced today. And so one of their development studios is Respawn, and so some of those layoffs are happening at Respawn. And so it's part of just restructuring and reprioritizing. Respawn also has a rumored, this one worries me a lot. Respawn also has a rumored RTS Star Wars game coming out. We have talked ad nauseum about this RTS coming out because my favorite Star Wars game of all time is Empire at War, the only Star Wars RTS we've ever gotten. And now this makes me really sweat. The next headline is going to be Star Wars RTS canceled as well. I don't know what's going to happen if that happens. I'm going to be so upset. I'm not going to be able to go to work the next day.
Yeah,
it's going to be really depressing.
Also, I look at Warhammer as an MMO RTS kind of thing. And it's a tabletop physical game, but, tangential to that is all the regular RTS games, Command and Conquer, Empire at War, this and that. And so I'm really interested in a new one, and I hope that one comes to fruition.
Yeah, me too. So, Colin, that wraps up the news for this week. That wraps up the biggest Star Wars headlines that we have to talk about. And so now all we have is our very last segment, and that is our Star Wars moment of the week. All right, Colin, what is your Star Wars moment of the week?
I was scrolling through Facebook again, and I noticed that James Earl Jones just had a birthday, or just last month, right? But, gosh, he was born in 1931. That makes him how old? 93. So, I brought, it's kind of a silly moment of the week. I think one of the last episodes I brought up John Williams being 91, but, to me, this really hits home. There's all these voices and these major parts of Star Wars and a bunch of other projects. I really like Field of Dreams and other stuff that James Earl Jones has done and John Williams has done that they're just going to go away. And it's really sad in a sense. I want James Earl Jones to live forever. And I think in a sense, whether rightly or wrongly, depending on how you feel about it, technology is going to kind of immortalize him since his voice is so iconic. But it's just not going to be the same, And so to see all these names, And it's not just the two I mentioned. You got Harrison Ford getting up there. Carrie Fisher's already gone. Peter Mayhew's already gone. You look at Billy D. Williams, and he's getting up there. Mark Hamill, he's getting up there. It's not, there's a lot of discussion about the sequels, but we're not going to have a choice about the prequels here pretty soon.
Yeah. You're right about that. And so it is a bummer to think about that with James Earl Jones' eventual passing. But it's nice to celebrate his birthday. It's nice that we've gotten to live with him this long. And like you said, through technology, he's gonna live for a very long time. Whether you think that's a good thing or not, it's the truth. It is the truth. My Star Wars moment of the week is the ones that I always love the most, where they're just organic and I run into people. This one, my coworker recently took a vacation to Disney, and he could not wait to show me how much his son loved the Star Wars section and Galaxy's Edge. He said his son isn't a Star Wars fan. His son has only ever seen, hear bits and pieces, but something about him being there at Galaxy's Edge just blew his mind, and he loved it. He built a droid, he built a lightsaber. I got to see all the pictures, and it was really cool. And I think that another young Star Wars fan was made last weekend.
It is so fun. I've been there a couple times. And do you know if they got to see any characters walking around?
Oh, yeah. There was a picture of him with Kylo Ren. He had seen some stormtroopers. I don't know who else they saw, but good. I know that they saw those.
That's the best part, if you ask me.
Yeah, it was. I was very happy for them, and it looked like they had a great time. So it was really cool to see. But I just like, obviously, everyone who listens to a Star Wars podcast is probably the Star Wars fan in their office. I mean, every office has got one, but everywhere has got the Star Wars guy, and
Yep.
we're those in our workplaces. But I bet if you're listening to this, you're those in yours, and you have an experience just like the one I'm talking about. So that wraps up the show for this week. We really appreciate you guys listening in. We really love talking about the Bad Batch and Star Wars with you guys. We'd love to know if, were we too harsh on this episode? You should get a hold of us on Instagram or in the email and let us know. I don't think we were, but I would love to hear from you guys nonetheless to see what you think about this episode, how you're liking the Bad Batch Season 3, and all of that. Guys, we really appreciate your support. The number one thing you can do to support us is leave a 5-star review. On Spotify, on Apple, we love it. It is huge for us. If you aren't listening to us on Spotify or Apple, maybe you're listening on YouTube, then leave us a thumbs up, a subscription, a like, or if you're listening on some other podcatcher, do whatever they've got there to help us get this algorithm going and to keep finding new listeners, keep finding new members of Station Nation. You guys can engage with us all over social media. You can find us on Twitter at SW_station. You can find us on Instagram at StarWars.station. We're on Facebook at Star Wars Station. We've got a group called Star Wars Station Cantina. There's a Discord link in the bio of this. We've got a Twitch, twitch.tv/Station Media. You guys can find us all over the place, and we love
we're going to Denver in 2
fans.
weeks for a Warhammer 40K event. Talk to us about that over there on the Discord as well. StarWarsStationPodcast.com. If you want stickers or some merch, you can do that too. Mm-hmm. But this week, donate to our charitable Emerald Area Foundation.
Yeah, please go to AmarilloAreaFoundation.org/disaster if you've got any spare change. It really will go a long way. It'll go directly to a firefighter on the front lines or directly to people recovering from the fire. And it is very crucial that we get anybody who can help to help. So thank you guys very much. Thank you so much for listening to us. And until next week, stay wizard/disaster. If you've got any spare change, it really will go a long way. It'll go directly to a firefighter on the front lines or directly to people recovering from the fire. And it is very crucial that we get anybody who can help to help. So thank you guys very much. Thank you so much for listening to us. And until next week, stay wizard.